Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with AfriTales 38. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section, and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. The Man with No Shoes. The rain fell in hard sheets, tapping against umbrellas and bouncing off black cars as if the sky itself was angry. The sidewalk shimmered with water, and the street lamps cast pale reflections onto the puddles. People with designer coats hurried into the warmth of their luxury sedans, none of them wanting to get drenched in the storm. In front of the grand lobby of the Argent Tower, a tall building made of glass and steel, stood a man with no shoes. His feet were bare on the wet pavement. His coat was old and torn, and his hair was clinging to his forehead. Rainwater trickled down his face. Yet he stayed as still as a statue, staring upward with an intensity that felt out of place in such weather. At that moment, Felix Hart, a billionaire known throughout the city for his sharp mind and cold business sense, stepped out of a black Bentley. He wore a tailored suit, polished shoes, and carried an umbrella held by his personal driver. Felix was used to people trying to catch his attention. He often saw protesters outside his buildings. Sometimes they wanted jobs, sometimes they wanted donations. Most of the time, he ignored them. This night, however, was different. It took Felix a second to recognize a man with no shoes. They had met once before, 1 month ago, when Felix was stuck in traffic near Mercer Station. A beggar had approached his tinted car window. Felix was in a decent mood that day, so he had rolled down the window and handed the man a crisp $100 bill. Normally, it was not his habit to give that much money to a random stranger. But the beggar's eyes that day had seemed full of raw desperation and, at the same time, a spark of hope. Felix had felt something stir in him, maybe sympathy, maybe curiosity. So he had handed over the $100 and never thought about it again. But here was that same man. He looked as though he had weathered even more hardship since their last encounter, standing there barefoot in the soaking rain. Yet, strangely enough, he wore a slight smile. Felix's driver tried to guide him swiftly into the lobby, but the beggar stepped forward, blocking Felix's path. He said in a clear, even tone, "Sir, do you remember me?" Felix raised one eyebrow in surprise. "Yes," he said. "You're the man I gave $100 to outside Mercer Station." The beggar nodded, water dripping from his chin. "That day changed my life, but I didn't come to ask for more money." His voice did not quake, despite the cold. There was a confidence in his words that made Felix hesitate. Felix's driver tried to step in and move the beggar away, but Felix raised a hand, stopping him. Felix had a reputation for being tough, but also for recognizing opportunity when he saw it. "If you're not here for more money," he said to the beggar, "what do you want?" Slowly, the man took a small, carefully wrapped package out of his ragged coat. It was protected by plastic to keep it dry. He extended it toward Felix with trembling hands. The package seemed oddly formal, like a gift carefully wrapped for a special occasion, even though it was small enough to fit in one hand. Felix took the package, slightly wary. He might have suspected it was something harmful, but the man's eyes did not hold any malice. Instead, they seemed to glow with gratitude and purpose. Felix peeled back the damp wrapping and found a folded letter inside, along with a check. The check bore his name, Felix Hart, written in a neat, practiced handwriting. He also saw some of money in the appropriate box, an amount that, while not huge for a billionaire, was not a trivial sum either. It was enough to catch his attention. Confusion flickered across Felix's face. "What is this?" he asked. "Are you giving me money?" The beggar nodded again. "It's a repayment for the $100 you gave me," he said, "and a sign of something bigger I've started. I hope you'll want to see it." Felix was not sure how to respond. People did not just show up in the rain handing him a check. A cynical part of him wondered if this was some kind of trick or publicity stunt. Yet he could not ignore the sincerity in the man's voice. Felix carefully opened the letter. It read, "You taught me how much change a single moment of kindness can spark. This check is my first repayment. I've started something real. I think you'll want to see it." The note was unsigned, but at the bottom was a simple business card. 2 words stared back at him, Project Ember. The card listed no phone number, no address, just a small logo in the corner that looked like a tiny flame. Felix's heart pounded with curiosity. Something about the mystery pulled him in. He had spent his life chasing big ideas and bigger profits, always looking for the next cutting-edge investment. Now, a man with no shoes was inviting him into a puzzle, one that felt both suspicious and intriguing. His driver cleared his throat, reminding Felix that they were both standing in the pouring rain. Felix looked around at the glimmering lights of Argent Tower's lobby, then back at the man. "Who are you?" Felix asked. "My name is Noah Rivers," the man said simply. He did not offer any more details. "You want me to follow this lead?" Felix said, holding up the card. "I don't have time for games." Noah stood firm, though he was soaked through and shaking from the cold. "This is no game," he said softly. "I believe that if you gave me a chance once, you might be willing to look at what I've built now." Felix stared at Noah for a moment, noticing how his face, although thin and tired, shone with a kind of passion. Felix could not quite put his finger on it, but it made him curious. "All right," Felix said at last. "I will look, but if this turns out to be some scheme to get more of my money—" Noah shook his head vigorously, droplets flying off his hair. "It's not a scam," he insisted. "I promise you. I've already repaid what you gave me. Now, it's bigger than just me." By now, a few onlookers were staring from the lobby. Felix's driver was anxious, certain that any more delay would ruin the expensive suit or cause more trouble. But Felix did not seem to care about the rain anymore. He put the letter and check back into the package and handed it to his driver to keep safe. Then he glanced back at Noah. "We'll talk soon," Felix said. His voice was firm, but the curiosity was there. "I want to see what you're up to." Noah just nodded, relief crossing his features, even as he remained rooted outside in the storm. Felix turned and walked into the brightly lit lobby, water pooling around his Italian leather shoes. Behind him, through the glass doors, he saw Noah lingering on the sidewalk before disappearing into the sheets of rain. At that moment, Felix had no way of knowing just how much his life was about to change again because of that single interaction. Upstairs, in the high-rise suite of Argent Tower, Felix could not stop thinking about Noah Rivers and that bizarre check. He had seen it was legitimate, but the amount was only a fraction of what Felix earned in a day. And yet, it was not the size of the check that mattered. It was the statement behind it. How had a man who seemed to have nothing managed to send him this repayment? The short letter mentioned the project, but gave almost no details. All he had was a name, Project Ember. Long after the driver left, and even after he removed his wet jacket and set it aside, Felix found himself staring at the business card. The words Project Ember glowed in his mind, refusing to let him rest. A single thought echoed inside him. What if this is something that's worth my time? He was used to dismissing such questions, but this time he could not. He remembered the glow in Noah's eyes, the strange determination in his voice. It did not feel like a typical plea for help or a desperate gamble. Felix's mind wandered back to that day at Mercer Station, the day he had impulsively rolled down his window. He recalled feeling a sudden tug of empathy, giving away $100 as if trying to ease his own conscience for a moment. He had done it and not looked back. But now, that single act had come full circle. He watched the rain outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning flashed across the city skyline. Felix stood there, alone in his penthouse office, the city lights reflecting off the glass. For once, he felt a ripple of excitement that was not about profit margins or shareholder meetings. It was about something else, something more human. He picked up his phone and asked his assistant to look into Project Ember. She had never heard of it. He told her to search for local organizations or nonprofits under that name. Before he hung up, he glanced at the check again, noticing it was drawn from a small local bank account. Nothing about it was fancy or corporate. When Felix finally settled down for the night, he could not stop thinking about the phrase from the letter. "This check is my first repayment. I've started something real. I think you'll want to see it." He had built his fortune by finding early-stage startups and investing in them, turning small beginnings into empires. Was it possible that this barefoot man had stumbled onto some new idea that could change lives? As the storm raged on, Felix's heart felt more alive than he had in years. Little did he know, the next steps he would take would not only alter the course of his own life, but also the lives of many people he had never even met. Felix decided to pay a visit in person. He rarely went anywhere unannounced, but this time he did not bother with sending advance notice or an assistant. Instead, he drove himself. He wanted to see the place without the usual fuss surrounding a billionaire's arrival. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to the glass towers and neatly paved streets Felix was used to. The roads here had potholes. The buildings wore chip paint, and many windows were boarded up. He saw abandoned shops with faded signs, empty lots overgrown with weeds, and people out on the sidewalks who seemed to have nowhere else to go. Finally, he found the address mentioned in the article, a rundown, two-story building once used as a community center. The outside looked tired, with cracked brick walls and a sagging roof. But as Felix approached, he noticed new life sprouting up around it. Someone had painted a bright mural on one wall. He could see half a dozen people milling about with a sense of purpose. A small sign near the entrance read Project Ember in simple lettering, accompanied by the same tiny flame logo that Felix had seen on Noah's card. The moment Felix stepped inside, he heard the buzzing of activity. The main hall had been cleaned and partially renovated. Long tables were filled with people huddled around laptops, discussing ideas in hushed tones. A corner of the room was stacked with books, forming a makeshift library. Another area contained a few sewing machines and craft supplies. Everything was organized in small clusters, like different stations for different projects. Felix was stunned. He had imagined a shelter or soup kitchen. Instead, he saw something more like a grassroots startup hub. There was an energy here that reminded him of the early days of tech accelerators, where people gathered to brainstorm new solutions, pitch wild ideas, and hope to create something meaningful. Felix's heart. A voice called from the far side of the room. Felix turned to see Noah Rivers, the same man he had met in the rain. But this time, Noah looked drastically different. He was clean-shaven, wearing decent clothes, and walking with sure steps. His eyes still held that deep, thoughtful determination. Noah approached with a small smile. "You actually came," he said, extending his hand. Felix shook it. "I had to see what all this was," he replied. He surveyed the large room, listening to the low hum of voices and the occasional laugh. "It's not what I expected." Noah gestured around. "Welcome to Project Ember," he said. "This place was abandoned. I got it at a low price with some help from a local church group. But more importantly, people here are building small businesses, teaching each other skills, and planning ways to help the community. We use tiny microloans, $50, $100, sometimes even less, to start small ventures. Then we reinvest the profits to help more people get a chance." Felix was silent for a moment, trying to absorb the idea. "Where did you get the money for these microloans?" he finally asked, his businessman instincts kicking in. Noah's smile widened. "It started with your $100. Felix raised an eyebrow. "You said you repaid that to me already, so you didn't spend it." Noah shook his head. "I used it to make more money first. I bought second-hand books that people were throwing away and sold them on a street corner. Then I used that profit to buy even more books. Before long, I had enough to rent a small cart. I started a street library system for kids. People started donating books and leaving tips. With that money, I funded a small literacy program in this neighborhood. Kids got interested, parents got involved. Soon, more volunteers came. We started to grow." Felix glanced around the large hall, where volunteers and participants were busy in various corners. Some were sorting supplies, while others discussed design ideas for homemade crafts. "But how did you manage to get this whole building up and running?" he asked, still doubtful. "We got an opportunity to lease it from the city for almost nothing," Noah explained. "They were going to demolish it, but a few local groups convinced the city council to let us try something new. We turned it into a startup incubator for homeless and low-income folks. Instead of just giving handouts, we give small loans and mentorship. Everyone has something to offer. Maybe they can cook, sew, fix cars, or code. We find a way to turn those skills into a micro-business." Felix felt a swirl of emotions. As a billionaire, he had seen many philanthropic projects, but none quite like this. Usually, large charities had big budgets, extensive planning, and well-known sponsors. Here, there was almost no outside publicity. Yet the place felt alive with hope and determination. People who might once have been overlooked were now engaged in meaningful work. Felix could sense a spark of possibility in the air, a flame that could grow into something larger. Does it actually work? Felix asked, scanning the room. He noticed a small table where a few people were carefully packaging homemade soaps with simple labels. Another table had an older woman teaching teenage girls how to stitch patterns on fabric. Noah's expression turned serious. "Yes," he said. "We've seen people go from sleeping on the streets to earning a modest income, to building stable lives. It's not easy. There are failures, and sometimes the money doesn't come back. But we believe in second chances, and many of those who fail come back stronger." Felix felt a rare sense of admiration creeping into his usually guarded heart. He was also starting to understand the name, Project Ember. An ember is a small glowing piece of coal or wood in a dying fire, seemingly tiny, yet capable of igniting something much bigger if nurtured. Just then, a tall man in a worn jacket approached them. "Noah, we need more laptops in the training room," he said, "and the developer wants to talk about next month's rent negotiations." He glanced at Felix, recognized him, and did a double-take. "Wait, is this?" Noah placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "This is Felix Hart, who made all this possible when he handed me $100 a while back." The man broke into a wide grin. "Thank you, Mr. Hart. I'm Jalen. I've been helping with job training and the coding classes here. We can only afford a few used laptops right now, but the classes are growing fast." Felix nodded, noticing how Jalen's eyes sparkled with pride, even in this humble setting. "Good to meet you," Felix said, momentarily unsure what else to say. In his corporate world, he was used to big budgets and official partnerships. Hey, everything ran on creativity, collaboration, and a lot of heart. "I can help with the laptops," Felix offered suddenly, surprising even himself. "I have connections with suppliers." Noah's smile returned. "That would be great. We're planning to run more classes for basic computer skills and even some advanced tutorials. Our main focus is giving people the tools to lift themselves up." Felix nodded, silently promising he would follow up. He took a step away to observe the entire hall again. Posters on the walls showcased local events, community potlucks, and success. Stories of people who had launched small businesses. Each story was a reminder that a little help and a little faith could transform a life. Yet, as Felix looked around, he noticed cracks in the walls, piles of construction materials in corners, and furniture that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Clearly, Project Ember was running on determination more than on funds. The place needed repairs, better equipment, and probably a stronger legal framework. Out of the corner of his eye, Felix saw a desk with documents labeled Legal and Development Project. Noah must have noticed Felix's gaze because he sighed softly. "There's a developer trying to buy the land. This block is part of a gentrification plan. Big money sees potential, but they don't care about what's happening inside these walls. They just see profit." "They made you an offer?" Felix asked. His businessman's curiosity piqued. "They did," Noah confirmed, crossing his arms. "A large sum for me, personally, if I'd just move everyone out. They want to tear this place down and build luxury apartments." I said no. Felix felt a flicker of respect. He knew that any rational person with no money would likely take such an offer. "Why did you turn it down?" Felix asked. Noah's gaze swept across the room, resting on a group of volunteers tutoring a few kids in math. "Because these people deserve a chance to build something for themselves. If we leave, they'll go back to the streets or scatter into other shelters. This place is more than a building. It's a symbol of what we can do together." Felix took a moment to consider everything. He came here out of curiosity, but now he felt a mix of empathy, responsibility, and a touch of guilt. He had handed Noah $100 on a whim. That money had become a spark that fueled this entire project. Could he really walk away from it? What happens if the developer pushes harder? Felix asked, considering the legal battles that might ensue. Noah gave a small shrug. "We fight back, or we try to negotiate. But they've already threatened to raise legal issues about the building's safety codes. We're hanging on by a thread." Felix exhaled slowly. He understood how cutthroat real estate development could be. Deals were made behind closed doors, and the people who had the least power were usually pushed aside. Another glance around confirmed that if someone did not step in, Project Ember might be stamped out before it could fully blossom. "I can help," Felix said, turning back to Noah. The words came out almost without him planning them. "I have lawyers, contacts, and resources. This might not be my usual type of investment, but I've never seen anything like it." Noah's guarded expression softened. "That would mean a lot. But I have one condition. If you help us, it can't just be about your public image. It has to be sincere. People here need real solutions, not a publicity stunt." Felix nodded, feeling a hint of shame. He had done many publicity-focused donations in the past to boost his reputation or polish his brand's image. But looking at Noah, he realized this was not the moment for that sort of thing. "I understand," Felix said quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the door. A woman rushed in, face pale, gesturing for Noah. Felix could not hear everything she said, but he picked up the words threats, property, and security. Noah excused himself and hurried over, leaving Felix alone to process the gravity of the situation. Standing in the middle of the Project Ember hub, Felix felt a strange surge of responsibility. This was more than just a quaint, feel-good story. Real lives were on the line. He realized that the single $100 bill he gave had set off a chain of events, and now he had the power to tip the scales in their favor or walk away and leave them to fight alone. For perhaps the first time in years, Felix felt a renewed sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is why I gave him that money in the first place." The fire they tried to kill. Tension was high at Project Ember in the weeks that followed. The developer threatening to buy the land grew more aggressive, sending legal notices that pointed out code violations and potential fines. Every day seemed to bring a new obstacle. Some local politicians sided with the developer, citing the economic benefits of new luxury condos. Media coverage was scant, and the few reporters who visited seemed more interested in sensationalizing the homeless situation than telling Project Ember's story. Felix's heart stayed true to his word. He brought in a team of lawyers from his own company, instructing them to find ways to protect the community center. The first step was making sure they met safety codes. Felix personally paid for electricians, plumbers, and construction workers to fix urgent problems. Walls were reinforced, roofs were patched, and fire escapes were installed. Project Ember soon met most regulations, though it was a race against time to keep up with the constant legal battles. Noah Rivers found himself working side by side with Felix more often. Despite their different backgrounds, they learned to respect each other's strengths. Felix had knowledge of finances, negotiations, and powerful people. Noah had the trust of the community, a passion for small-scale innovation, and a level of empathy that warmed everyone around him. Through long discussions, they slowly bridged the gap between a billionaire's world and the realities of the homeless. One evening, they discovered graffiti sprayed on the front door of the community center. The words were menacing, "Get out or else." Broken glass littered the ground nearby, and a few windows were shattered. The vandalism deeply rattled the volunteers. For many, this place had become a symbol of hope, and now it felt under siege. Felix stood outside with Noah, inspecting the damage. "They are trying to scare you into selling," Felix said, his voice grim. Noah ran a hand through his hair. "I know," he said softly, "but we can't give in." A passing neighbor paused to join them. "Saw some guys here late last night," she said. "Didn't recognize them, but they looked like they were checking the place out." "Thank you," Noah responded, handing her the phone number for Project Ember's makeshift security watch. "If you see anything else, please call." When she left, Felix turned to Noah. "We need better security. Cameras, maybe even someone at the door 24/7, he said, shaking his head. "I hate seeing them resort to threats." Noah nodded. "We can set up cameras, but we also need the community to stand together. That's our real strength. People who benefit from Project Ember will defend it." Felix respected that optimism, though he also knew how ruthless big money could be. Threats, vandalism, lawsuits. He had seen these tactics before in boardrooms and hostile takeovers. The difference now was that actual lives hung in the balance, not just corporate assets. In the days that followed, Felix poured more resources into the center, not just financially but also personally. He spent hours talking to participants at Project Ember. He listened to their stories. Some were veterans who had fallen on hard times. Others were single mothers escaping difficult relationships. One man, once an accountant, had lost his job and spiraled into depression. Now, with a small loan from Project Ember, he was starting a modest tax preparation service, offering affordable help to other low-income families. "You're giving me a second chance," the former accountant told Felix one afternoon. "No one else would even hire me. But here, I'm not a failure. I'm just a guy with skills that can help my neighbors." As Felix heard these stories, he began to rediscover parts of himself he had long forgotten. Once, years ago, he had dreamed of creating positive change through his business ventures, not just making money. But over time, the demands of the market, the never-ending pursuit of profits, and the pressures of maintaining his billionaire lifestyle had chipped away at those ideals. Now, standing in the center's newly painted halls, seeing people rebuild their lives, he felt a spark of that original passion reignite. Noah noticed Felix's growing emotional investment. Late one night, after most volunteers had gone home, they stood together in the quiet building. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and distant street noise filtered in from the windows. "I never asked you," Noah said, breaking the silence. "Why did you give me that $100 the first time we met? You could have just ignored me like everyone else." Felix hesitated, staring at the faint reflection of the overhead lights on the polished floor. "I don't know," he admitted. "I think, for a moment, I saw how desperate you were. And maybe I recognized some part of myself in your eyes, someone who needed a break, an opportunity." Noah nodded. "That moment changed my life," he said quietly. "But it also taught me something important. One person's small act of kindness can have a huge ripple effect, especially in places that need it most." Felix placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "You've turned it into something incredible," he said. "I wish the rest of the world could see this." Before Noah could reply, they heard a sudden crash from outside. Rushing to the window, they saw a figure running away into the darkness. Another window pane had been smashed, scattering broken glass. Alarmed, they checked the door but found no one. This time, the damage included another graffiti message, threatening them to leave by the end of the week. The next day, Felix doubled the security presence. He also hosted a press conference, inviting local media outlets to Project Ember. He hoped shining a spotlight on the vandalism would deter future attacks. Noah spoke passionately about the center's mission. "We are not beggars," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "We are embers, and if you try to crush us, we burn brighter. We take small sparks of hope and turn them into something that can change lives." The speech was recorded by a local freelance journalist and posted online, where it quickly went viral. Within a few days, viewers across the city, and even in other states, began noticing the story. Public support for Project Ember skyrocketed. Volunteers poured in, offering time, services, and donations of supplies. The developers' hostile approach started to backfire, as people began demanding the city protect the community center rather than demolish it. Seeing the tide turn, the developer tried another angle, a sudden lawsuit claiming Project Ember violated zoning laws. They demanded the city immediately revoke the center's lease. Felix's lawyers fought back, arguing that the city had granted a special use permit. The legal battle escalated, capturing the interest of more reporters and activists. During those intense weeks, Felix and Noah discovered they worked well together. Felix navigated the legal and financial labyrinth, pushing city officials to back down. Meanwhile, Noah rallied the local residents and volunteers, keeping morale high and ensuring the center continued to operate. The sense of unity and purpose in Project Ember only grew, despite the outside pressure. Then came the final standoff. The developer managed to fast-track a demolition order, citing safety concerns. Large machinery rumbled into the neighborhood on a gray morning, ready to tear down the building as soon as the official paperwork was approved. Panic spread through Project Ember. Volunteers clutched their possessions. Children looked frightened, and some older people feared losing the only shelter they had. Noah, with a determined look on his face, stepped out onto the street and stood directly in front of the machinery. Others followed, forming a human barricade. Word spread quickly. Neighbors, small business owners, and community supporters arrived in droves. Soon, the street was flooded with people chanting, "Save Project Ember." They held signs that read, "Hope lives here, and we stand with Ember." Felix joined them, still wearing a neat suit, but standing side by side with a crowd of everyday citizens. The media arrived, cameras rolling, capturing this dramatic moment. The demolition crew hesitated, unsure if they could legally proceed with so many protesters blocking their path. Some city officials arrived, too, but seeing the overwhelming public support, they grew nervous about the backlash. In a moment of clarity, Noah climbed onto a small platform and raised a megaphone. His voice echoed across the street. "This is our home. We are not asking for a handout. We are asking for the right to stand on our own 2 feet, to prove that with the smallest spark, hope can grow, communities can heal, and people can thrive. This is not just a building. This is a movement." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Cameras zoomed in on Noah's face. He continued, voice strong and unwavering. "Some of us have been homeless, jobless, or struggling, but we have skills, dreams, and dignity. We refuse to be invisible any longer. We are embers. If you try to extinguish us, we will burn brighter." The scene was electric. Videos of his speech shot up online and spread nationwide. Public outcry against the demolition reached a fever pitch. Officials, now fearing public outrage and potential legal repercussions, ordered the demolition crew to stand down. The developers' representatives fumed, but there was little they could do against such a massive wave of protest and media attention. That same day, the city council convened an emergency meeting. Felix's lawyers presented evidence of Project Ember's positive impact. Dozens of community members shared testimonies of how the center had changed their lives. Even the city's mayor, sensing the political winds, expressed support. By the end of the day, the demolition order was revoked, and the developer's lawsuit was put on hold. The victory felt surreal for everyone involved. Volunteers cried tears of relief. Neighbors hugged in the streets. News crews reported live, praising the unlikely alliance between a billionaire and a once homeless man. The world saw that real change can happen when people unite around a common cause. In the aftermath, donations poured in, grants were offered, and officials began to see Project Ember not as an eyesore, but as a beacon of hope for the city. Felix helped secure additional funding for expansions. New rooms were added to the center, including a proper kitchen, a tech workshop, and a childcare area. More importantly, the blueprint of Project Ember's approach, microloans, mentorship, and community building, spread to other neighborhoods, other cities, and possibly beyond. For Felix, the transformation was personal, too. He found himself rethinking how he invested his money and his time. He realized that business and compassion did not have to be opposites. Noah, on the other hand, discovered that with the right partner, even the most powerful systems in society could be challenged. Standing in the newly renovated main hall one evening, Felix and Noah watched as children attended a free tutoring session. Small entrepreneurs discussed supply chains for handmade crafts, and volunteers greeted newcomers at the door. The place was alive, humming with promise. Noah turned to Felix, a grateful smile on his face. "Thank you. I still can't believe how far we've come." Felix patted Noah on the back. "I should be the one thanking you," he said. "All of this started because you refused to let a single act of kindness die. You turned it into a spark that lit a fire." Noah glanced at a post on the wall with the Project Ember motto, "We are embers. If you try to crush us, we burn brighter." "That's the power of a second glance," Noah said, voice soft. "When someone with everything takes a moment to truly see someone with nothing." Felix nodded. "Yes," he agreed, "and together we've built something that can't be ignored." In that moment, they both understood that Project Ember was not just about this one building, or even this one city. It was about believing that hope, compassion, and opportunity can create miracles, especially for those who are being forgotten. And once that belief starts to spread, it becomes nearly impossible to extinguish. Thanks for watching. Please forget to click on subscribe and share button. God bless you.